Union High School District Board of Trustees meeting of May 5th, 2022 is called to order at 2:17 p.m. The following members are present: Anna L. Piercy and Mary Randall Trejo, Catherine H. Smith, Brian O'Neill, and I. Al Jabbar. Staff has requested the following amendments to the agenda. Replace page 3 of the agenda to include the following student names under item 7.3. Christopher Cervantes, Devora Estrada, and Michelle Munoz. I think you all have the copy in front of you. And then Exhibit LLL, page 3 to 5, to list all monthly salaries as whole dollars. And then Exhibit NNN, replace the cost amount on the number 4A.
Wait a minute.
LLL.
Yep.
LLL.
Well, the first one was LLL, which was pages 3 to 5, to list all monthly salaries as whole dollars.
Yep.
And then Exhibit NNN, replace the cost amount on the page number 4A. And then the final one is Exhibit PPP.
Wait, hold it. Okay, 3 of 10 here.
All right, let me repeat it one more time. It's Exhibit LLL, page 3 to 5, to list all monthly salaries as whole dollars. And then Exhibit NNN, replace the cost amount on the number 4A. You got, everybody's good there? All right, I see head nodding, okay. And then Exhibit PPP, replace page 2 to reflect dissenting vote under item 6.3.3.
Got it.
To accept as amended.
Perfect, I have a motion as amended, and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We will now proceed to the study session. I will hand it over to Nancy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We have Rick Musto and Lindsay Hayward from LPA to give the update for the facility master plan. This is an update to our 2014 facility master plan. And obviously, this is the draft master plan, and then we will be bringing this back to the board in June for the adoption. So any questions you have, please feel free to ask at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you and good afternoon. Again, my name is Rick Musto, Managing Director with LPA, and we have Lindsay Hayward here as well. She's an educational planner with LPA, and she's been very busy for the last, since I think November, working on this plan. So I'm very happy here to give you an update. I think all of you at your desks, you should have a complete copy of all the diagrams at least, because we are not going to be walking through each individual site. That would probably take the better part of the afternoon, so I'll spare you that for today. And let's see if I can get this to work. Here we go. So we'll just walk you through the schedule, and I really want to emphasize the process that we've been through since we did the update. As you know, we did the original master plan in 2014. The California Department of Education does recommend that the updates, that you do updates to your master plans about every 5 to 8 years. So you're right there where you need to be, and it's great that you are pursuing an update, because quite a bit has changed, as you know, in about, it's been 8 years since the original master plan. So we'll talk a little bit about the community survey that was done in March, and talk about the scope categories, and deal with cost a little bit, and talk about our next steps in terms of prioritization. And please, I know you will, but interrupt me if you'd like, anywhere if you have questions, if I cover something a little quick. This is the very, very difficult to read, but the really important part is on the upper right-hand piece, you see a big red arrow. So we really started this process in November of 2021, and here we are towards the very end. So we've got a couple more steps to go to finish, and we're very close. So we've been, there's been a lot of work and a lot of meetings, and what I'd like to do is give you a little summary of all the meetings that we've had. So the stakeholder engagement process that we've been through, we've had an executive steering committee we've been meeting with regularly, so we've had about 10 of those to date. We've actually had 4 large community forums, We just finished one last week. We've met with the Citizens Oversight Committee. We've actually had 2 cabinet meetings, I think, so far. This might be our second Board of Trustees meeting. I think we did one earlier just as an update, as a beginning piece. Met with LCAP. And then a lot of focus group meetings with a lot of individual groups within the district. So all the different focus group, interest groups that gave us kind of an update on where things lied with the sites and with facilities. We did an online survey. We had a lot of principal meetings and a lot of site committee meetings that the principals formed. So really altogether, we probably hit about 1,600 participants. So you can see here, there's been quite a bit of participants. So I think for an update, I think we cast a really wide net, and I think it's been very successful in terms of all the people that have given us input, which is really the key to getting a successful master plan, is just reaching out to as many people as you can. We're not the authors of the master plan. We're just sort of the vessel to create it. The one activity we did at the last forum, it was over at the convention center, and we had a large group. I think we had close to 50 people. And what we asked them to do was weigh in on, we did an activity, and we asked them to help you and help us decide for a prioritization process. So what they did is, instead of having this group prioritize and say, we think you should do this school versus that school, we actually asked them to prioritize the criteria that would be used to identify what you would want to do in terms of projects, in terms of forming a project list. So I don't know if I want to go over these individually, but essentially we ask questions like, does the project develop equity by ensuring that the sites with the greatest need for repairs and or new improvements are addressed first? We have questions such as, does the project address imminent liability regarding maintenance, condition systems, functionality, code compliance, ADA, health safety? Does the project enhance technology? Does the project benefit the majority of students and staff? And so on. So we actually have all that great information. We're currently compiling it, and the next time we get together and when we meet with the cabinet again, we're going to present back, at least from the forum standpoint, where they thought the highest priority should be in terms of criteria, which I think will really help us inform the direction that we'll go. Let's see, there we are. Here's a couple images actually from that activity. We had a lot of different sites show up. It was great. I think Gilbert High School got the prize. They had the most participants, and some of the students presented back some of the criteria. And they're very great kids. It was really awesome to see them and to listen to their comments. Now we're going to take a step further back in time, and I think it was around in March, the district did their first poll, or the first survey. And I don't expect you to be able to read this slide either, but what I'll do is I'll go over this with you in a little bit of detail. This was a survey that a consultant did with the school district. I think it was mainly telephone survey, and they made a lot of calls, and the good news is they asked to rank different criteria, different things that are important to the schools, and whether they felt they were strongly favorable or somewhat favorable. And actually, this is just kind of a highlight of one of the areas. And I know the poll consultant has already presented to the board, so I don't think it's worth your time to go over that in detail again. So this is just kind of a high-level reminder that a lot of the criteria that were identified, that the public felt very strongly favorable or somewhat favorable. The highest one, I guess, is the question about upgrading older schools so they meet current health codes, building safety codes, provide proper access for students with disabilities. If you put those numbers together at the very top row, you're at about 86% favorability, either strongly favorable or somewhat favorable. So that's very good. And all the way down to the bottom, things like install solar, improving health ventilation, insulation, doors, windows to increase efficiency. So more about, being good stewards of the environment and sustainability. That was towards the lower part of the list, and even that was still about 77% or so favorable. So I think that was really a favorable outcome. And the final slide, and these questionnaires, the way they poll, they ask a lot of questions up front, and this, oh, there we go. And then they give the people being polled a little background information and say, here's a little more history, and they try to give them some information. And after that's done, then they ask the question one more time. So in terms of the question about pursuing a bond, the final question was, the results were about 58% between definitely yes and probably yes. So that was as of March. Now, they're going to redo this poll, and I think one of the comments that were made is that happened at a time, it was like the day of or the day after the war started, and so maybe people were feeling a little, hesitant at that time, but we're going to redo the poll in June, and we're going to bring back those results to you in July, or the district will. So you'll get to see the difference, and I'm sure the consultant will highlight the delta and the changes. And I think everyone would think the numbers might get a little better by that time. Any questions so far as I race through this? Maybe I'm just out of range here. You want to give it a shot, or maybe just do it manually? Actually, I'm going to let Lindsay walk you through. These are the scope, project scope categories.
I probably, just to kind of clarification, on page 4, I just wanted to, I know the bottom box that you have, you're kind of talking about board of education meetings, and then community forums. The third one, which is their school site committees, and it says just total sites. Did that mean that we actually made 20 presentations to school site committees?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
So not only did we, the process, speak into the mic. The process started with us meeting with each individual site committee, and they met with the principal, and they brought together a site committee meeting. We walked around the site a bit with them, asked a lot of questions. We went over the previous master plan and sort of talked about maybe what was talked about as their priorities in the prior master plan. And then walked the site, asked more questions as to their current needs, and if those have changed since the last time. Obviously, you've done a lot of work on your campuses in the last handful of years, so understanding where those changes might have occurred, what priorities were actually already accomplished as a part of the current bond. And then we went through the process with the community forums. We had one on the east side, one on the west side, and then we actually got back together with each of the principals one-on-one to hear feedback based on their draft master plan. So we've met with school representatives a couple times in that perspective, and they were also all included in the community forums. Those committees came to each of the community forums as well.
Okay, perfect.
We've had some great
And then
groups turn out.
The total participants, which is 1,600 plus, which includes, I'm kind of talking about the parent aspect of it.
Yes.
They're part of that school site council is also aggregated into that?
Yes, so the school site, school site did have parent representatives as a part of that, as well as staff, different staff members, athletic heads, things like that. And then as far as the number getting up to 1,600, we actually pushed out a survey to students, to parents, so that's what that little pie chart is on the right. We heard back on that survey. Outside of even the in-person gatherings, we heard from 764 parents, 388 students, close to 200 teachers, and then 56 admin and librarians. So that helped us garner even more input and understanding of the need.
Right. Thank you.
You bet.
I just want to say one thing. To me, what we're hearing here and seeing is such a wonderful example of why America is America.
Oh.
And I wonder about other countries. How many other countries go through all of this to do what we do? And sadly, I don't think the general public understands or has a grip of what we do to make public education as good as we can make it. So I just want you to know I'm thrilled and overwhelmed because it's so wonderful what you're doing.
Thank you very much. We love working on educational projects, that's for sure. And you have some very passionate stakeholders, so that makes the process even more fun. Are you going to click forward for me just so I know? Okay, perfect. So as a means to break down what feels like a very large amount of potential work or a large amount of need in a district of your size, we break things down into project scope categories, and this does a couple things for us. One, it allows us to cost estimate these categories separately so that as you're looking at maybe priorities and equity and things of that nature across the district as you implement projects moving forward, it gives you things broken down into a little bit more digestible pockets, if you will. And it also allows us to really understand sort of where there's major need across the district, across different school sites, and then site by site. So it really just allows us to break it down into more palatable chunks. And so I'm going to walk through each of the scope categories one by one to kind of clarify what's in each of those. So in category 1, it's modernize and reconfigure existing classrooms. So what we mean by that is If you have an existing classroom that hasn't really been touched in a while and is eligible for modernization, that would mean things like new carpet, new lighting, new finishes, things of that nature that really sort of bring it up. You guys have done some lighting projects and things like that and some modernization already on quite a few campuses, but where that hasn't happened, that's what's in this category. This category also encompasses maybe combining a couple classrooms if they're undersized to make them more adequately sized for the educational model you're doing. So scope category number 2 is existing building systems, toilets, and improved energy efficiency. So this I like to look at as sort of all the utility stuff that's above the ground that you might be able to see, whereas category 3 site utilities is sort of all the stuff you don't see, which is always the unfortunate part of putting money underground that people can't see but is vital to kind of the performance and needs of the school. So these two sort of go hand in hand a bit in tandem. So existing building systems would be things like HVAC units, restrooms sit in this category. So redoing those, which we heard from both students and parents on their survey, restrooms always comes up, it's a thing. And then site utilities being more the underground, the feeds into the campus. And a lot of those have actually, on the campuses that you've done significant quad improvements on in the last handful of years with your Measure H dollars, a lot of that has actually been updated as a part of that process, so you're not going back and digging things up to only do that work again, which is great. Scope category 4 is new construction, so anywhere on a plan that you see anything slated for new construction, that's captured in this category, so we can kind of separate that from modernization as you look at different categories. This would obviously be a more expensive alternative, but sometimes when you have really aged buildings where it costs more to sort of replace it or structurally upgrade it, it makes more sense at a certain threshold to do new construction. Thanks, Rick, you're keeping me on point here. Scope category 5 is design lab, science, career tech, and elective programs. So this even parses out construction in a more significant way. So this is whether it's modernization or new construction, anything that's kind of under the heading of a science lab or an elective lab, some of those larger spaces that are a little more intensive and tend to be a little more expensive because of the amenities they provide, things like making sure you have water in science labs or in elective labs, that sits in category 5. Similarly, category 6, performing arts, entails things like your band room, choir, drama, dance, anything to do with your theaters on campuses, that would be under your performing arts category. Scope category 7 is multi-purpose rooms or multi-purpose and cafeteria rooms, because those are kind of part and parcel to one another, as well as food service improvements, so anything to do with your kitchens as well sits in category 7. Category 8 is physical education improvements, and this is really important to clarify from another scope category we're about to get to, which these are indoor physical education improvements. So this is from gyms to locker rooms to wrestling rooms, team rooms, things of that nature that are interior space, as compared to a future one which is more on the exterior as far as play fields and things. 9 is admin and staff support, so that's your administrative, faculty work, faculty lounge, anything that's really about supporting your staff. I will say that the parent centers on your campus are encompassed in this category, just as a point of clarification. And then number 10 is student collaboration and student support. So this speaks to all the amazing things you guys are doing as a district to support your students. So things like your wellness centers, anything to do with sort of counseling, your pledge centers, so college and career centers, things of that nature. All the way you're kind of tackling it completely around from kind of mental health, all of those things to supporting their future and career in college sits under this category relative to that student support. And then number 11, safety and security. This is a bit of, I won't call it a catch-all category, but it does entail a lot. So safety and security, I think most of us think, oh, you can see well, so good lighting, fencing to make sure, secure point of entry. Safety and security also includes parking lots and drop-off. So that's kind of a safety feature as people are able to safely pick up and drop off their kids to school. Number 12 is outdoor learning environments and quads. So again, these two, 12 and 13, are both outdoor scopes, but we do try to separate one that's more about enhancing the learning environment just outside the classrooms and some of those social outdoor space for kids relative to quads and things like that. And then 13, which has everything to do with PE and athletic fields and hard courts. And last but not least, the last few we're rounding out. So number 14 is 21st century learning classroom flexibility. This really speaks to the flexible furniture. So we were very careful because on this particularly category when we cost estimated, because we know you've done a lot of work on this in the past, that most campuses have about 50% of this work done. So we were able to encapsulate that and make sure we weren't capturing that again in terms of reflecting the reality of where you are. Number 15 is technology infrastructure, so that is fairly self-explanatory, I guess, in terms of infrastructure to make sure you have the needs to do technology. The way I look at that one is if you can kind of turn a building upside down and shake it, whatever doesn't fall out falls in that category relative to technology. Anything that can kind of fall to the floor would be something that's more equipment-based at a later date. And then last but not least, the category 16 is the Community Resource Center. So this was something we looked at as one of the district initiatives to make sure as these come online through the grant program and everything else, as you guys serve to support community, parents, and students at each of your campuses, that we put this in its own category relative to understanding what that will take as well. So those are the scope categories. If you have any questions, hopefully I didn't go through that too fast.
Just a question.
Go ahead.
You bet.
Go ahead. I think it was on page 2, you mentioned restrooms. People are always
Yes.
interested in those. With the water shortages that we're looking at now and probably more so in the future, are you looking at waterless urinals for the men's room, where you don't turn water on with the faucet, where you put your hands under and it comes on for a
Right, the
short period of
sensor.
time?
Absolutely.
Innovative ideas?
I think those are all, I mean, that kind of happens as you work more closely with standards and implementing these, but I think those are all conversations. So from an estimate standpoint, yes, those can absolutely be accomplished in the costs that we have attributed to this. I think even the pandemic has brought on a lot of conversation about touchless, anything we can get. And so I think moving forward, that's something the district will be considering as they create their standards. But yes, toilets seem to always come up from parents and students. It doesn't seem to matter what district we're in. It is a hot topic. So you're not alone.
I would like to ask a question. For the electrical heating, HVAC, AC, do we have electrical air cleaners like they do in hospitals?
I'm going to defer to Patty on that.
No, those are just HVAC units. We have air purifiers in the classrooms, but they're not, and then the MERV 13 filters. That's how our classrooms are equipped at this point.
And that is because,
That's typical classroom construction, and, you know, obviously, to add maybe UV lights, or that increases the cost also. We might, now that we're looking at ESSER, we might look at different types of units, but, you know, with the ESSER funding that we have, but at this point, no, we don't have anything like you're mentioning. It's
they
just-
have them in hospitals, and we have them in our home. Was advised by an architect, and I have a gentleman come and clean them 4 times a year. And I wonder about the air purifiers that we have in the rooms. Are those cleaned?
Yeah, we have to replace filters on those, so we're actually in the process of doing so. So we're looking at maybe twice a year to start replacing filters.
Twice a year. And so they're replaced, they're not cleaned.
The machines actually tell us when we need to replace the filters. A light comes on and we need to
And
go
so
through
the
the process.
filters are purchased.
Yes,
I
those
see.
are already purchased.
Thank you very much, Patty.
And Leanne, I can go
Yeah,
ahead.
actually, sorry, Patty, you can actually clean the filters as well. So based on the use of those purifiers, they tell you how often you should replace the filters. But in between the replacements, you can actually go in there and clean them. It's quick, it's a vacuum and a wet down.
Oh, thank you.
And they're being done at the sites.
Obviously with COVID, and they say it's going to be with us forever. And to me, this is extremely important, and I think for everybody.
We have just the filters within the units, plus what we have at ground level within the classroom, the air purifiers.
Thank you.
And my question was, it might be a Patty question, but you had mentioned our community resource and funding that's coming down the line. I was thinking about item 10, and, you know, you mentioned our mental health services. Do you know if, or have you heard through the grapevine, or if there any funding coming down the line for, for construction or structures, building structures. I know there's some mental health dollars for employees, for personnel, but have you heard about,
No, I know that, no, but we're all, if there's something out there, we're always looking for different types of funding to augment whatever funds we have, right? So,
Turn over every rock, right? Every rock we can find.
yes.
So I have a quick, and this is a public document, obviously, right? So on 9, I know you mentioned that the parent centers will be included in there,
Yes,
but I'd like to highlight that and make sure that we insert that in there.
absolutely.
And maybe put administration staff and parent support.
Okay.
So that we obviously want
That
to.
it's more clear.
Yes.
No, that's great. That's a great point. I'll make that note.
So what is the difference in your mind between what Mr. Jabbar just talked about and number 16, the community resource?
So the district has sort of those 3 tiers of support. So there's the student support piece, which is the wellness centers where you have your, not even your counselors, but sort of the speech pathologists, the psychologists, social workers, things of that nature that really can surround the student with those types of services. As well as under that category is the Pledge Center, which is kind of the college career center, and then there's also counseling under that. So it's sort of enveloping that student with any service they could need to support their development. The Parent Center is really intended, and correct me anywhere in cabinet if I'm going to misspeak here, but we've learned a lot in this district, and it's amazing the level of service you guys provide. So the Parent Center is really then to do that next tier of helping to support parents that support their students. So having that resource on campus where they come in, and that's where the FACES coordinator is. Relative to that. And then the Community Resource Center is always going to be on the perimeter of the campus, that it has exterior access that does not cross the security perimeter of the campus. So that's more of a community resource on a more global scale in which your schools sit in the community. So there might be more, I don't know if there's any clarifying, but that's the high level I understand.
For example, when we were looking at these even grants, we have, Carlos already has brought us, Patty and myself, to go to sites and with some of his staff as well. And we have looked at already where would be an ideal location if we were to bring in additional resources, or using our current classrooms, which wing would actually possibly work. So we have already identified many of the spaces already. So in the event that we get notified we get these grants, we'll be pretty much like ready to go and figure out, okay, these rooms that we can have. Now, not every single school is gonna be as easy, but some school will be easier than others. One of the other things that we do look at is to make sure that there is restroom access to the community centers, because, when they come in, and the idea is these will be open like after school hours, right, and into nighttime as well. So we want to make sure that when they come through, there's also, they have to use the restrooms, that there's also available. So these are the things that from day one, since I got here, staff has been very vocal about, we want to make sure there's spaces available. So pretty much, I've gone to so many sites with Carlos and his team to identify locations already at this point.
I could see that, because I think there's also community organizations who like to come in to rent our facilities, right? So it's a great opportunity to make use of those type of locations as well.
Yes, and we also have different services on the weekends, different, for example, even dental, they come in mobile unit as well, so different things like that. So, for example, we prefer to have these centers close by the parking lot and have exterior doors. If not, then is there a way that we can secure some of the areas? Like, for example, maybe if we have to put some fencing in one area. We've thought about that. If there are 2 sets of restrooms, maybe one set we can just fence off, so that will be still part of the campus. And this other restroom, we can take it and use it as a community center restrooms. Right, and then even when they come in at night, which would be the best areas? Is there enough lighting, for example? So, all these different things we already have, discussed and talked about to make sure we have, these different things that we need.
So, which leads me to ask, like, I know that we're applying for community school grants. I'm assuming that we've also paid attention to each of the campuses on where we would locate a community school if that were to happen, right?
Yes, I mean, I think we have a lot of locations already. It's just a matter of moving things around if we need to, you know, things like that. And, yeah, so, and some rooms we do have to move, or if we need to bring additional things, then we may have to do that. Some schools are a little bit harder, but I think we have enough, I think, rooms hopefully in a couple years to be able to move things around.
And locations have been identified on each of the master plan sites as a part of this effort. That's what the cost is tied to, so. All right, do you want me to click for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move along here. There's been a couple of questions about cost, so that's a good introduction to the next segment here. I get the pleasure to talk about money here. So to start with, we're going to talk about this is just a funding summary. So this is all the different pots of money that the district has access to. And then we're going to follow up with what our first draft cost estimate is for all the need. So this would be the pieces that would fund the need. So to go through these one by one, this is very similar to what we would have presented in 2014. You have about $13 million in developer fees, deferred maintenance set-asides, $30 million. And that's a set-aside for maintenance operations. You get about, set aside in operations per year times 10 years. Then Measure H balance, current funds committed about 20 million. So you're just about through all of your Measure H dollars. It's perfect timing. So then state school facilities program, the matching funds that potentially you can get from the state. So there's some remaining state eligibility, mainly for modernization, about $96 million worth. And of course, that isn't money that you have in the bank. That's money you have to apply to and then wait for the state to fund the application. And so there's always strings attached to the state money. Future general obligation bond. Right now, we're identifying a number of about 319 million. And that's just a current placeholder, and that number could change depending on what the district's decisions are for that category. The district's been really good at pursuing the ESSER funds. That's from the feds. So that really funds HVAC, outdoor learning areas, and related improvements. And those have to be spent by 2024. But there's about $46 million worth of dollars there. And I know that Patty's been very busy spending that money. So it's starting to, yes. And then E-rate, it's set aside for technology infrastructure. That's money you get about $3 million per year times 10 years.
So on the 319 million, the potential, if we were to get that, there would be state matching on top of that, and do you have any idea how much more that would be?
96.
That,
Once we spend our funding, then we submit our projects to the state and we know that we have about 96 million in eligibility, but we need to apply. We know that's there, and it keeps going up every year, so this could change, go up actually. So every time we have a project that's eligible, we submit to the state as soon as we're out of DSA.
okay, so
This
that,
is money we have as of today that we could apply for.
the 96 million, yes.
Yes.
But that doesn't take into consideration 319 million of a new bond.
Correct.
Okay, so how much?
In addition.
Yeah, so how much in addition would the new bond bring in if there was money from the state available?
So typically our funding is for modernization at 60% of the cost of the project, 40%, and 60% is the state. So what the bond money would do, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but the bond dollars, what they would do is bring in 40%, that would allow us to seek the 60% of the cost of the project that the state would give us through eligibility.
Yeah, another way to say that is to get access to the state money, you have to have your own local dollars to apply a match.
Which
So,
is the 319 million?
yeah, so the only way to get access to the 96 is that you have, a portion of your 319 million that you would apply to a project, then to be eligible for your share of the 96 million. But the 96 is the total max currently that you have.
Okay, that's not the way I was understanding what was saying here.
Oh,
I thought the 96 we already had in the bag that we could get.
What
No.
we have is 62 million.
Okay, thank you.
So this is in addition to the 62.
Okay.
so
Thank you.
this is summary of all the potential funds to apply to future projects. And if you add that whole list together, you're at about 527 million. But then what we would like to just make sure everybody understands is these are dollars in 2022 price. So this is, money today. And the things that when we talk about the costs of actual projects, there's things that this dollars doesn't cover. So what we'd like to do is you really only have 2/3 of these dollars to apply to projects. And because there's things that the 1/3 that you want to save, those apply to things that haven't been defined, escalation in construction cost. Even though you may come down with a project list, we really don't know when projects will be timed. So you have to set aside dollars for those escalation costs. You might have interim housing costs that are very difficult to define now. So you want to set aside part of your bond for interim housing. There's things like off-site fees you might pay to City of Anaheim or other cities. So there's altogether, we recommend about 1/3 of your total dollars be set aside for those future unknowns as you then go to do your implementation plan that would implement the projects as you move forward. So really the total, with this particular funding list here, the total amount you would have to apply to projects is about $353 million. So now we're going to talk about actual, let's see, I probably need your help with the clicker on that one. So with the plans in your hand there, the different sites, we went ahead and did a cost estimate of all the current need over and above what you've done to date. This is all the new needs. It actually comes to close to $2 billion, about about $1,986,000,000. So it's a pretty sizable amount of money. That's what's left. And this current slide really shows the dollars applied across the different scope categories that Lindsay went over. So you can get an idea of how that number relates to all the different scope categories. So we did it this way, and I'll just click to the next one to show you the way. And then if you were to look at it in terms of how those dollars would apply by school site, we've got it summarized for convenience here as well. So we've got the junior highs, the high schools, and then your other facilities. Altogether, again, it adds up to about the $2 billion number. This is our current estimate, and again, these are total project cost dollars in 2022 dollars. So this includes things like all the soft costs you'd have on a project, like all the fees you would pay, the DSA fees, the architecture engineering fees, inspection fees, furniture and equipment, and things like that. All the things that wouldn't be considered part of your hard cost are included in these numbers. So the actual hard cost numbers, we typically think of those, they're typically about 75% of these numbers. And then so the 25% you would set aside for the soft cost. There's a lot here, and I don't know if you want to go through these in any detail, but just to give you a little background, in 2014, when we were presenting the same list, the total came to about $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion. Big number at the time, but again, that was 8 years ago. I asked my estimator what that would be in today's dollars, and he said if you were to escalate those dollars in 2014 till today, it's about a 1.5% increase. So you'd be getting pretty close to a $2 billion value in terms of the cost back in 2014. So that just gives you an idea how much things have escalated just in those last 8 years. And of course, what's in these current numbers are based on the need today, not the need back in 2014. So you've accomplished a lot of great work, but the work you haven't accomplished, your facilities are now 8 years older than they were back in 2014. So the existing buildings, the costs are more significant now than they were 8 years ago. So they might have been categorized as minor modernizations, and if they hadn't been modernized then, now they're going to be more significant modernization. A lot of your HVAC equipment might have been not quite at a point where they needed a replacement. Now they're at a point where they need to be replaced. So keep that in mind when you look at the difference between the two. So there's a lot more need today than there was. But we were very, very careful, and probably the biggest challenge of this update has been to making sure we understand what you have completed to date. And then there's this big area in the middle of things that you have in process. And what we didn't want to do is count need if you've already had that accounted for in terms of work that's in process, And if it's in process, it means it's already been associated with Measure H funds. So we're not doubling up on scopes, I hope that makes sense.
So this almost 2 billion is after we've completed all the projects that we already have money for?
That is correct. It's the complete list of projects that you would do at a school site. Everything that, was the need identified. So there's a lot of scopes. If you look through those diagrams, you can see pretty much everything's being touched that wasn't touched previously. It wasn't like we said, okay, we're only going to do this much work at the school sites. The idea of this master plan is to give you the complete list. And there isn't a school district in California that does a master plan that can fund their complete list of need. It just never happens. There's the list, it's, just ask LA Unified. They pass multi-billion-dollar bonds every couple of years, and that list just keeps going and never ends. So
just a question, hypothetical. We need a new high school, and it needs to support 2,400 students without the land cost. What is it going to cost to put it up, support it with everything inside of it?
That's a pretty tough question to answer. I think I would probably have to get back to you on that one because
I'm just trying to draw some parallels to
yeah.
all this modernization. Since we've had 2 bonds since I've been on board, that's close to about 400 million, I think we've invested. Now 400 plus the 2 million. Now we're talking about $2.5 billion. That's what I'm wondering. Do you start a whole new district with less than $2.5 billion?
Yeah, the costs are pretty high right now, and it depends on number of enrollment, the types of programs, the buildings. There's a lot of variables there, but we're doing some new working with some districts on new high schools, and they're up there. So we're doing one up in the Bay Area, and I think you could say the total cost of a high school, middle school, elementary might be with a B. I don't know if it's like somewhere in a $1 billion range for one big complete campus from K-12, just to give you an idea. Of course, that's a little higher priced up in the Bay Area, but it's pretty staggering what construction costs of what's happened just the last year or so. The good news is these dollars are all established on this recent escalation that we've all seen, 2022 dollars. There's a lot of things we don't know about the future still. There's a lot of unknowns with the future. Yes?
I am just sort of thinking outside the box and a variable. With all the problems in China and the materials not coming, now Shanghai apparently is just in total lockdown and all these containers are building and ships are not, and we're not getting what we're ordering and needing. And so these, to me, are such a huge unknown into the future. And of course, what is it going to do to pricing? It's stupefying, quite frankly. When you ask that question, it's a huge question, and they just aren't answerable at this point.
Yeah, there are a lot of unknowns, that's for sure. The district, Patty and her group, they continue to move on. There's projects in construction and in planning. We're overseeing many projects in construction, and there's challenges at all the sites, but there's always workarounds, and they move ahead. But you're right, you don't know if it's a very finite time frame and this will get resolved, or if it's going to go on for some time. But certainly, any good construction design team looks at those variables and makes decisions about what materials to use. Certainly, certain materials cost a lot more, so you might be recommended to steer away from certain types of construction types. But you have to look at where you're at that time and talk and understand what's happening in the community.
Do you have an idea of what percentage of our construction materials come from China?
We have quite a few, and right now what we're hearing, it changes almost, it's a couple of every month, almost, what we're hearing, and it's really critical when we plan projects. We're hearing, for instance, switch gears, for electrical switch gears for the point of entry of the electricity of power to our sites, almost a year out. So you place the order, and they might arrive on site in a year. HVAC units are taking system and the manufacturer, 18 to maybe 20, 26 weeks. So it's almost like a half a year, right there, right, 6 months. So that's what we're dealing with. And it changes, it's almost like every month, there's just new things we have to deal with.
50% of our costs are tied up with China, would you say, when we build, modernize?
I would say, I'm not sure about that number, but I think a lot of it is coming from China.
What about Russia?
I'm sorry?
What about Russia?
I'm not sure about Russia. I haven't heard.
Anything come from there?
I'm sorry?
I said, anything come from there in our construction?
Nothing comes to mind that I can think of, so.
Just curious because of the geopolitical
Yeah.
area that we're in right now, and who knows what's going to happen, a month from now, as people get ideas in their head, what it would be doing to us.
Yeah.
There's a lot about construction from Russia.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've heard of any materials that we get from there. And if there were, the good thing is for the most of the time, there are options. It's not like you're totally strung. Sometimes the options cost more money, that's the difficulty. But if you can get ahead of it before you commit in a bid, then you can make sure that you have your specifications written in a way that allows a little flexibility. So you always hear of issues that maybe they could be more localized, or there might be for a couple-month delay on something, so you might get a recommendation to shift to a different product. And usually there's other options to be able to
Do we have
do
to
that.
buy steel from America, or do we buy steel from other countries?
I don't know if this district has a policy, no. No, okay.
Because that was one of the faux pas that happened, I think, 1 or 2 bonds ago. The prices just went up because it was China. Caused huge, well,
Yeah.
There are supply issues with steel right now. I was just touring a job site yesterday, not one of our projects, but they actually brought the contractor on board early to procure their steel ahead of doing any other bid work, just so they could try to get it to arrive and not delay their schedule. So there are strategies, like Rick is saying, when you think ahead and start planning your projects, there are strategies to be able to try to get ahead and meet your schedule. It just takes more planning, and it might take partnering with somebody at an earlier phase, like bringing on a construction person or a team to be able to procure some materials that you know are a struggle earlier, to be able to hit those deadlines. There are some workarounds. It's not fun. None of it's fun, right? Nobody wants to deal with supply issues, but it's kind of universal for everyone right now.
And we do look at that when we plan projects, but again, there's also a lot of coordination issues, and when you buy things, the district buys in advance, that could become also an issue during construction. So we have to really make sure we partner well with a contractor and suppliers, and so it's something you have to look at everything really before you make that decision to buy materials in advance.
So I have a,
Go ahead. I was just going to make a comment that whatever challenges arise, I'm confident in Patty and the team. You've worked out so many issues before, and, like you said, you have those strategies, and you consult with other folks, and we partner with other folks, so I just wanted to,
We're gonna vet first.
yeah.
But I have to say, planning is becoming very challenging these days, just because of what we're hearing. So, you're probably gonna hear more and more of that from us. And that just translates into delays or changes in cost, right? So,
Right,
these supply chain issues are real.
they are.
it deepens our appreciation of what all of you people do.
so I'm looking at the draft budget cost summary by school, right? So I'll take Anaheim High School, for instance, it's 165 million. I'm assuming that the site also prioritize what they need the most versus bells and whistles for our schools?
Yes.
So that way we can focus on those?
Yeah, so that really, you're kind of jumping into our next steps, and I'll cover that in detail, but that was one of the tasks of why we've had the sites form a site committee, and why we met with the principal so many times, and they have then given us a list of their top priorities.
Okay.
So they understand that there's a prioritization process, and that, they need to be selective in terms of what they do.
And we'll be sharing that with you. We'll share it with cabinet and you, especially at the June 16th meeting. But ultimately, we also try to look for themes if there's things that are constantly coming up. Something I just know off the top of my head that came up a
like at Anaheim High School, for example, where you have Cook Auditorium, or Western, where you have Handel Stadium, those are obviously district priorities, right? And they're going to be very high priority.
I know it's a lot to digest, but if you have any other questions, I'm sure you'll have plenty, but
Here, on number 21, District Central Kitchen, 37 million. How much is in the budget, not in the budget, but in the financial statement geared towards the kitchen?
I believe there was about, is it $4 million that was set aside?
Is this for the new kitchen that
Yes,
you're
central
referring to
kitchen.
within these new numbers?
I'm assuming that's what this number 21 is, District Central Kitchen,
There was a set aside.
Yeah.
37 million.
Money set aside for that one, right?
It was just a little bit.
That's what we estimate it's going to be.
Yeah, but how much money, maybe,
Yeah, I think it was only 4 million, or 3 to 4 million, that's it. In the, yeah, so it's only currently in the Fund 13 balances, it's between, it's about $4 million that was set aside, that's it.
come
So,
down quite a bit?
yeah, so that's why we weren't not able to build it this last time. I mean, so, and knowing that their fund balance, that's not gonna be enough to build the central kitchen without support from some type of a bond for that.
if you don't have any questions at the moment, we could go to really this is kind of the end of what we wanted to talk about today, is that our next steps are to formulate all these priorities that we said we're in the process of doing. We're going to present those back to the cabinet, and we're going to involve the cabinet in an activity to try to understand and digest these numbers and prioritize school sites and projects. And we'll also help them by giving them feedback we received from the community, from the previous surveys, so we can then end up with at least a recommendation to bring back here to the board. And we understand the next date to come back here would be June 16th, where we would like to show you the results of all that prioritization and ask if you wanted to adopt the master plan at that time. Actually, we did have a couple slides here, just maybe for a point of familiarity. Maybe you've seen these enough in the past, but we did put a couple slides up to show you kind of examples of what you have in your packet. Like I said earlier, we probably wouldn't want to walk through every single site, but if you wanted to take a moment to see how it's organized, I could walk you through that a little bit. So each site actually has an existing image of the slide of the campus the way it looks today. And to our best ability, we tried to include things that were in process. And everything's color-coded to show the different types of classrooms. They're all solid colors. You can see and there's a star at the entry point. We've got the kind of the circulation drop-off with a yellow dotted line there. Then what we did is, you see the very next one is the proposed. So I'm looking at right now, we just have Sycamore up on the screen. And we've taken those same colors on the left hand. You can see there's a legend on the right hand side there, and it's probably very small in your sheet as well as it is on the screen here. But the solid color means modernization that Lindsay described. So we're not demoing the building or moving walls around. We're modernizing those spaces. The second color-coded block, if you're looking at the legend, it's a color that's white. So it's basically a solid white elements that are with a particular color. That represents new construction. So everything that's white with just the color, and the color represents the type of classroom it might be, whether it's a science lab or administrative type space. But anytime you see white, it means new construction, and sometimes you see part of these boxes floating off in space. So that means it's actually the second floor, so there is multi-story construction proposed. So you can see the two-story in those cases. Then the third type of organization here is on the right-hand side of your legend. It's the same colored box, but there's hash marks through it. That's that more intense version of modernization. That means we're reconfiguring the space, moving walls around, and it's sometimes changing the use. So that's a little heavier amount of effort. So we identify those separately from modernization because the costs associated are differently. Then you can see notes about the play fields and areas where we've gotten This isn't meant to be a design, again, this is a 10,000-foot view of your campus. This gives a guideline to the architects that inherit this to implement this. So it would say something like, we show main quad. That just triggers that there's been dollars set aside for a main quad update. And you've seen plenty of beautiful main quads in some of your modernized campuses to see what that could look like. But we've got dollars set aside to be able to implement that level of finish on your quads. We have outdoor learning courts identified as well in the site, new parking lots, solars identified. There's lots of, so all the scopes that you saw in the cost estimates are reflected here. So this gives you an idea of how all those dollars are being spent.
Can we go to the Anaheim proposed?
Sure, it happens to be one that we have up here.
And it's worth pointing out too, I will say on Sycamore, where you see the white lines where it might have an X, for instance, like where the admin building is, it's grayed out and there's an X, because that's a project you guys just finished accomplishing with your Measure H dollars. So we're obviously not gonna do more work in that because it's money well spent. Same with a lot of the Bucky Cove, a lot of your outdoor improvements, we've drawn those scope lines through those to make sure that we've captured and acknowledged that work is taking place and we're not estimating more work to be done in those areas. So, on to Anaheim.
So we're looking at Anaheim proposed.
So I'm just curious, I know I asked this question from Nancy, I think Patty, you and I and Nancy need to sit down to have a discussion at some point. I'm looking at the Lincoln parking lot thing. I know it's a proposed, but are we not aggregating or taking into account the other side with the rest of the properties, including the parking lot, as of right?
It's the one to the east,
Yeah.
to the west.
To the
West,
yeah,
Which is
west.
Car wash.
The city, that's why we're not really showing it on the master plan.
Okay.
And the master plan can always be amended in the future. So it's just continuing to update, right? So at this point, until that gets, negotiated or, we're really not showing it on the master plan.
So this particular one, I'm assuming that we had already projected to get this done, right? The one that's showing right now with the parking lots.
That's ours.
Okay, but we have already projected and allocated funding for it?
We have dollars set aside, we're just, really, we'd like to look at both properties, right, the adjacent property as well, so we can develop the whole site, just come up with a plan, and we're in the process of doing so pretty soon.
Yeah, and I'll bring this up with maybe another item where I'll have to discuss with the rest of the board, right? Is to figure out, depending on how long it's taking for us to negotiate with the city, because it's been already quite some time, right?
10 years.
And I think the community itself is actually losing patience, primarily because it's impacting parking in the neighborhoods, in the back end of like Cypress and those areas, right? So I would propose that, and this is the discussion that I wanted to have, is we take a look at and expedite that aspect of it. I know we're having discussions right now with the city, but we gotta take a look at it and see how we can expedite that process to put that in the front burner to get it done. Besides being a parking issue, it's also an eyesore now, right? Because it's been gated up and it's been there for so long. I know we had our banners there, but those banners fall off and, it's just a green thing there where people are asking, what are we doing in the community itself? So I think we need to look at expediting that as soon as possible.
Does this take into consideration the possible widening of the street?
Yeah, we already,
Design, we need to be prepared to take that into consideration.
So what we're looking at here, is it already in the consideration, or would that be?
This is at master plan level, it's just
Okay,
not
okay,
really that
all right.
defined.
Okay, thank you.
that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, you were on time.
How to work.
It's my dog.
Okay, so,
It's my yummy.
so we go to section, okay.
Go to closed session.
Yeah. All right, so we will now, since our study session is complete, public comments, closed session item. Is there anyone that wishes to address the Board of Trustees regarding closed session items only at this time? I see no one, so the Board of Trustees will now hold a closed session to discuss item 5.1 through 5.10 on the agenda, and it is now 3:17, and we will move to closed session.